The Jaxson Dart era as quarterback of the New York Giants has begun. The news broke on Tuesday that the Giants will replace Russell Wilson with Dart, the rookie first round pick at quarterback for the week 4 game this week against the Los Angeles Chargers. Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View here to give some initial thoughts on the move to Jaxson Dart, along with Big Blue Views. Tony Del Genio. Tony, thank you for hopping on in what we refer to as an emergency podcast.
Good to be here.
All right, so let's just start with your initial thought when you heard the news.
So I think probably no one can be surprised that Brian Dable made this decision this week. Obviously, he's fighting for his job, and I think he's hanging by a thread at this point because the quarterback that he had been starting, Russell Wilson, has had 2 very poor games and only one good game, and the one good game that he had, which admittedly was a great game, other than that final interception, was against a team that is being revealed to have a terrible defense, the Dallas Cowboys. And so, how much longer can he wait to make this move? Everybody always holds out the ideal of the Kansas City Chiefs and how they sat Patrick Mahomes all season until the last game of the season after they'd already clinched their playoff spot to let him get his first NFL action, even though he was wowing his teammates in training camp even. But the Giants have never been in that position to do that. And so, going back to Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin couldn't wait more than half a season to replace future Hall of Famer Kurt Warner with Eli, and then going back a few years, you saw the same thing with Daniel Jones being replaced by. With Daniel Jones replacing Eli in Game 3 of the season, so Dable waited 1 week longer before doing that, and I think what all of those have in common were coaches that were upset with how things were going with the veteran, and I just didn't have the patience to really wait. So I think so I think there are good things about it, many good things about it, but I also think there are risks associated with it, depending on just how far along Jaxson Dart really is and how much he struggled at the beginning, and that's what we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and we'll talk about all of that. I will say this. I had the opportunity to be on the Zoom call with Brian Dable on Monday afternoon. Brian Dable did not say, I'm going to start Jaxson Dart this week, but he might as well have, because he did, he obviously said, we're watching the film, we're evaluating and all of that stuff. But for me, the key phrase that he said on Monday afternoon was, I have not talked to Russ yet. And that was a scream from the mountaintop that we're going to Jaxson Dart, but I need to tell Russ before I tell the media, before I tell the world. So, I mean, that's the right way to do it. So I'm not surprised even a little bit by this news today. The way that I look at it, yes, you're 100% right. The ideal would be a playoff team, let the kid sit, let the kid play week 18 to get his feet wet and all that, or be a playoff, an edge of the playoff race team. And I always wondered what Brian Dable would do if the Giants were that sort of 500 team hovering right around the playoff race, 10 or 11 or 12 weeks in. Would he choose to play Jaxson Dart and say that that's more important than making the playoffs as a wild card team right now? But what it comes down to is, for me, is this: the Giants have been horrible since 2022, and you and I have talked about that. They are 9-28 now since making that playoff run in 2022. They are 3-17 since the beginning of last season. They have lost 14 out of their last 15 games. Brian Daboll has no cards left to play. I am not sure at this point how much the locker room is still tuned into Brian Daboll. That I wouldn't have said that last week, but after watching this game Sunday and talking to some other people that I've talked to recently, I'm not sure this team is tuned into Brian Daboll at this point. Brian Daboll has one card to play before he loses his job, and that card is Jaxson Dart. Joe Shane can say it was an organizational decision to draft Dart, but this was a guy that Brian Daboll pounded the table for. This was his quarterback. This was his choice. He can't go down without getting Jaxson Dart on the field. And at this point, it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better with Russell Wilson. It's not Russell Wilson's fault. There's fault to go around every player on the roster, every position group on the roster, offense, defense, special teams. No one can look themselves in the mirror at this point and say they haven't contributed to 0-3. But to keep his job, whether it's the best thing for Jaxson Dart or not, this is the only card Brian Daboll has to play at this point. So you had to know it was coming.
Yeah, my one misgiving is that I originally thought anyway, that they'd wait a week, get the Chargers game out of the way, because the Chargers are a good team. I mean, I might be wrong about the Chargers, but it looks to me like that team is finally getting its stuff together, and they've got a tough defense. They've got a great quarterback. They've beefed up their receiving core, and I think that's a tough team to be playing right now. They're 3-0, and so I'm thinking, well, who do you want to send your rookie quarterback out against? I don't know that's the team I'd want to send him out against. I might want to wait a week, get away from MetLife, where the the fans are restless, and a bad performance, and who knows how they'll react to it, and wait until they go to New Orleans, one of the poorer teams in the NFL, on the road the week after that, and start Dart in that less imposing situation than this. But on the other hand, another performance this Sunday against the Chargers, like the one last Sunday against Kansas City, and Daboll might not even get to the point where he ever does get to start Jaxson Dart before he's out the door. So I can understand why he's doing this right now.
Absolutely, Tony. I thought about this earlier this week, and I know we have a comment in here, with one of our listeners being surprised to hear that the team has tuned Daboll out so quickly. I don't think players ask for this. It's not their job to ask for this. They wouldn't ask for this. Darius Slayton said the other day that he still believes Russell Wilson's the best opportunity, gives them the best opportunity to win. But it's not within players' purview to go to the coach and ask for a quarterback change. What I will say is nobody tuned Brian Daboll out quickly. This is year 4 for Brian Daboll. This is year 3 of the Giants struggling and not moving forward and not solving the same problems that they had in 2023. It's year 3 of them playing undisciplined football and committing too many penalties. It's year 3 of them missing too many assignments. And those things all make you wonder just just how much, how tuned in are they? How tuned in are they? The players will tell you they love Daboll. The players will tell you, if you ask them, that they love Daboll, they believe in his message. They'll tell you all of that. but I think sometimes the way that they're playing, the lack of discipline, the lack of urgency that they show sometimes leads you probably to think otherwise, that they're not completely bought in. And that is my personal belief, and what I think from some of the other folks that I've talked to recently. But as I said, I just think Brian Daboll, he knows what's up, and he knows, he very nearly lost his job at the end of last season. He understands that. And I know John Mara hates the idea of making a midseason coaching change. A midseason coaching change is not going to fix the 2025 New York Giants. But a midseason coaching change, I think, is very possible if they lose this week, which if you look at 3-0 versus 0-3, the odds are that they will. If they go to New Orleans 0-4 and manage to lose in New Orleans and they're 0-5 after having just played the worst team on their schedule, then you're staring at a possible 0-17 season. And Brian Daboll might not survive 0-5 to see the rest of the 12 losses. So I feel like he knows if he's ever going to get Dart on the field and give a couple games of evidence that this might work, he had to do it now. He had no choice.
Yeah, and I don't know, have the Giants ever fired a head coach mid-season? I'm thinking back.
They fired McAdoo mid-season. They fired McAdoo,
of course, McAdoo
and Jerry Reese. That hadn't happened, I think.
Yeah, and
that was way back in the 70s. They fired somebody mid-season, I think, and I can't remember who it was.
Exactly. But of course, McAdoo, and
that had less to do with the record than all of the other stuff that was going on. The mess that McAdoo made out of Eli, the fact that McAdoo had players leaving the field when they got mad at McAdoo and threatening to leave the stadium when they got benched, which is something DRC did in a game. They had players not bothering to come back from the bye week, which was Janoris Jenkins. They had players taking their gripes not to the coach, not to the front office, but to the media. So the situation had become completely untenable, and McAdoo had no control over it. It was crystal clear that the players had no respect for the head coach, so there was no choice.
Yeah,
but here, I just don't know. I mean, I think that to simply save some sort of face, to simply prevent the second half of the season from watching all sorts of planes fly over the stadium, begging for changes and this and that. I think it's possible that this season gets to a point where John Mara says the only thing I can do is fire the head coach and give people the signal that we're going to move on. We're going to try something different.
Yeah. I was looking at Mark Thompson's comment. I can't think of a quarterback that waited who didn't thrive later. Actually, it's you look at the quarterback the Giants are going to be playing Sunday, Justin Herbert. He was drafted and he was going to sit for a year, and then there was the whole fiasco where the Chargers doctor injected Tyrod Taylor's chest and punctured his I can't remember
punctured his lung, I think, yes,
lung or something like that, and they had to start Justin Herbert in an emergency because Taylor couldn't go because of what the doctor had done to them. But they had planned to sit Justin Herbert for a while. I don't know what would have happened had that not occurred, whether they would have made the switch to Justin Herbert later in the season. But in that particular case, they had no choice but to put Justin Herbert in because it happened, I guess, just before game time, if I remember correctly.
And Buffalo, if you remember, I'm trying to look it up. Buffalo had planned to go slowly with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
But then Nathan Peterman happened. And Nathan Peterman in I don't even remember how many interceptions he threw in that very first game in that season opener, but he was awful. And they chose, they had felt like they had no choice, but to go to Josh Allen at that point. So, I think they would have preferred to wait. I have said again and again, Tony, that in my view, no rookie quarterback is ever hurt by by sitting for a while, by sitting, by learning, by studying. Yes, in theory, you learn by playing, you learn by doing, but you can also learn what the NFL is. You can learn what defenses can do. You can learn how to manage your life as an NFL player. These kids are 21, 22 years old. Matt Waldman had pointed this out to me way back before the draft. He said part of the issue sometimes with these young quarterbacks and these young players is it's their first time away from a college setting. It's their first time living completely on their own. In some cases, it's their first experience having this much money. And NIL has changed that somewhat. But you're on your own. You're out of a college dorm situation. You're out of a college living environment. There is something to be said for having time to figure out how to live your life, for having time to figure out which people around you have your best interests at heart and which people around you have their hands out and are trying to mooch off your success and off your money. So there are a lot of benefits to sitting. No quarterback's ever been hurt by that. A lot of quarterbacks have been hurt by being thrown into awful situations too soon. And you just cross your fingers that Jaxson Dart doesn't end up being one of them.
Yeah, and I think you look at some of the recent years. Speaking of Josh Allen was a bad quarterback his first year, and he was somewhat better his second year, and he didn't really become good until they got Stephon Diggs, and he had a viable wide receiver to throw to. But I think he had done a lot of work behind the scenes to improve himself. But it really took him until his third year before he was a good quarterback. And I think you see a lot of examples like that. You also see examples of quarterbacks who get off to a good start and then that fades pretty quickly. So, Daniel Jones had that triumphant first start as a Giant in Tampa Bay, but that was a good situation, right? After Eli had lost the first two games, going to Tampa Bay, they had a bad defense. They were on the road. It was a good situation to put him in, and he was tremendous that first game. Then he won one more game, I think, against Washington, where he didn't look as good. I think he got intercepted at least once, and but they won that game. And then after that, defenses, I think, quickly caught on to what he was and what was not doing, and what they were doing to him as an offense, and he was kind of mostly bad the rest of the season until the second to last game in Washington, when he had a great game. So it's one of these situations where I think, regardless of what happens Sunday, it's hard to say what the future's going to hold. If he plays well against the Chargers, that's great, and then they go to New Orleans. But then after that, they've got a gauntlet of good teams to go through. I mean, they've got Eagles twice, I think, in the next maybe 3 or 4 weeks after that, and I can't remember who else they play. But
they go Chargers,
Denver,
Saints, Eagles, Denver, Eagles.
Yeah.
And that's just brutal.
Yeah.
And yes, some good defenses. Some, obviously the defending Super Bowl champions twice in 3 weeks. Not pretty. But and look, there are going to be there are probably going to be good moments with Dart, and there are probably going to be a lot of bad moments with Jaxson Dart. It's there were a lot of bad moments in Eli Manning's first year. There were some good moments and some bad moments in Daniel Jones's first year. How many Daniel Jones fumbled the ball so many times in his rookie season that 5 years later, when he almost never fumbled the ball anymore, there were still people who said Daniel Jones has a fumbling problem because that's the idea that was put in their head in 2019, the first couple of times that they saw him play. So what I'm going to say is don't put him in the Hall of Fame if he goes out there and has 2 really good weeks his first 2 weeks. And don't come to Big Blue View and say he's a bust and he's this and he's that and the Giants never should have traded up and to get this guy, and they should have drafted J.J. McCarthy last year, or they should have drafted Michael Penix, or why didn't they draft Bo Nix? The next 2 weeks is not going to make or break Jaxson Dart. The next 2 weeks is just the beginning of what we'll find out over the next 14 games. It's just the beginning of what we'll find out over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and I think what I want to see from him, I mean, obviously you want to see him do well his first time out, but you know that eventually he'll mess up. And I think one of the keys, and I think this is what made Eli Manning as successful as he was in New York, is how resilient he is after he plays poorly, right? And not all quarterbacks are. Some quarterbacks can get changed in a bad way by lack of success. And
David Carr.
David Carr is a great example. I would say Daniel Jones too. I mean, I think he at some point started, played like he was expecting to lose there, and I don't expect that to happen with Dart, because Dart, from what I can see on TV, looks like a pretty confident personality, pretty outgoing personality, and I think I'll be surprised if he reacts poorly to adversity, but you never know until it actually happens, and you know that it's going to happen, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Patrick Mahomes finally starts the last game of his rookie season, then comes out and starts the next year and throws 50 touchdowns. This is
right.
And almost beats Tom Brady in a playoff game. That doesn't happen very often.
No, and the C.J. Stroud of 2 years ago and Jaden Daniels of last year are also still, I don't want to say anomalies, but they are still the exception to the rule. All right. We're finding Drake May, as good as he is and could still be, Drake May is in his second year, is still having bumps in the road. Michael Penix is now having a rough go in Atlanta. Cam Ward is starting in Tennessee, the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And while he's showing flashes, they haven't won a game. He hasn't statistically, lit up the scoreboard. So there are going to be growing pains. There are going to be days when it looks really ugly. There are probably going to be a lot of days when the Giants score 6 points. But here's the thing about that. They scored 6 points in week 1. They scored 9 points in week 3. There's no point in continuing to do that with a 37-year-old quarterback who's not going to be your future, who's not going to get any better, whose physical skill set is regressing, whose comfort in the pocket, because he's not the mobile guy that he used to be, whose comfort in the pocket seems to be slipping away. When the rush comes, if you have those bad days, if you've got Jaxson Dart at quarterback, you can at least say he made some throws during the game that made you feel good about it. we're going to go through growing pains with this guy, and maybe we come out the other side of it with what the Giants got with Eli Manning. And if you do that, then taking some of the bad days becomes worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think as a sidelight, what this really does is put the onus back on Dable. I mean, not
Absolutely.
as if it wasn't already, but Dable could always make the argument that well, it was the quarterback, and certainly there was some truth to that, right? Okay, uh, but now with this new quarterback, you've got to see some play designs that are innovative and what people consider good offense in today's
Mhm.
NFL. You can't see some of the things that they've been running the first couple of weeks of the season, where it just looks like, oh, let's send four guys out, and
Right.
to,
You
we've got to see a modern offense, and
look,
will they do that with Dart, or won't they? And if they don't do that, then even if Dart has some success, it could just accelerate the end of the line for Brian Dable.
if they go 0-17, Brian Dable's not going to come back. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
If this is the only card that Dable had left to play, but along with you're looking at Jaxson Dart starting in week 4. Okay. If Jaxson Dart doesn't look like a quarterback who's getting better, doesn't look like a quarterback who can eventually be that franchise guy, then it's just not going to work for Brian Daboll. But the other thing is, if you continue to have games where you have 21 penalties called against you, 14 accepted penalties, if guys continue to blow assignments, if you continue, to have some of the things happen, on the field that have happened over the last couple of years, then, you know, then Jaxson Dart's not going to be enough to save Brian Daboll. But as I said, it was the only card that Daboll could play at this point. I wanted to address, a couple of the comments. User goes by the name of Tablet Deep had asked a little while ago about, in the scenario that Daboll gets fired, could the Giants keep Joe Shane? And I believe that is within the realm of possibility. I'll let you comment on that in a second, Tony. But I think John Mara made it clear last offseason that he can separate the two men. He can separate the two men because they have different roles, different jobs, different responsibilities, and he can separate the two performances individually. So I think that is entirely possible if ownership believes that the roster is better than the performance. Okay. So if the roster is better than the performance and ownership feels like they're being given better players and not making the most of those players, then I certainly think that Daboll could go and Shane could stay.
Yeah, and I think right that it must depend in part on what you think of the last couple of draft classes and how they play. Uh, right now, if you're looking at the most recent draft class, now obviously you've got to see Jaxson Dart do something, right? If he looks like somebody who's just like not ready to play in the NFL, then that's going to get you in trouble right away, because you're really staking your job on him being a success at some level. But if you think about their other draft picks, uh, you have Marcus Bowe, who has looked good for a rookie offensive lineman. You got Scadaboo, who's already after one game at MetLife the fan favorite, and he's probably even without the injury to Tyrone Tracy, He's probably going to be the lead back anyway. And you need to see whether things like that are being successful, whether the free agent signings, Paulson and Debo and Javon Holland, play well over the course of the season. So if it looks as if the roster is improved, which it does to me, I think the Giants roster is a significantly better one than the one that Shane took over, and even much better than it was last year. Uh, if you see those things, then I think Shane can stick around. But if all of these draft picks start failing, then that's a different story. I mean, you can even go back to 2022, and there are sometimes it takes years for players to really kind of show what they can do. One of the positive things I think from the first couple of weeks of the season this year is that Kayvon Thibodeau, who most people regarded as something of a disappointment for a number 5 draft pick, he's been playing pretty well so far this season. It's early on, but it looks like he's kind of finally coming into his own as an all around edge. Evan Neal, apparently that boat has sailed, but the more Wandale Robinson, okay, who everyone had pegged as a certain type of receiver. The one thing that Russell Wilson showed is that you can throw deep to Wandale Robinson, and he can catch the ball. So
Mhm.
if I think if it looks like the talent level has gotten better, has gotten significantly better, then I think Shane can stay, even if this turns out to be a bad season. Dart has to have a minimum level of competence, I think, that he exhibits, and not just completely look like a deer caught in the headlights. And I think Drake May is the good example for that. Everybody, I think most people think Drake May has a good chance to be successful. And I watched him against Pittsburgh on Sunday, and he looks good, but then he makes mistakes too. And so that you say, oh, he's not a rookie, but he's getting his first real significant playing time now, and uh, he shows those flashes, but then he shows times when you can see that he's inexperienced. I'll take that type of performance from Jaxson Dart this year, where you see the flashes, but not all the time, and I think that's enough to save Shane's job.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. And I always try to find examples when it comes to Joe Shane of a GM who had a rough start to his career, at least record wise, and then and has had things turn around for him. And if you look at the Los Angeles Rams, the general manager is Les Snead. Okay, Les Snead in his first 5 years as the general manager of the Rams did not have a winning season. His teams that he put together did not compile a single winning season. And then in 2017, the Rams fired Jeff Fisher, hired Sean McVay, and that franchise has had winning seasons every year except one since then, and won a Super Bowl along the way, lost a Super Bowl along the way. But yes, I don't know that John Mara will, but I just wanted to point out that example of a GM who had, at least record wise, a rough start, but then found the right head coach, found the right coaching staff, and things have turned around. But we'll see what happens with Joe Shane. John Mara might decide to sweep them both out and start over again. Who knows? But we'll see. Um, a couple of questions in the comments about why the Giants seem to have, improved talent, but don't seem to play together well. And the comment is about poor coaching. And I'll let you, Tony, I don't know, do you have a thought about that? I mean, I have my own, but I don't want to hold the floor forever here. I want to let you have your say as well.
So I think that uh, I think that's a fair question to ask about the defense in particular. I feel like the Giants have a decent amount of talent on defense, yet the defense itself does not look imposing a lot of the time. And I really worry that that is about the coaching. I do not feel that the Giants have an untalented defense, and I feel like they should be giving up fewer points than they actually are. Now you can say that, oh, they only gave up 22 points to Patrick Mahomes the other night. That wasn't so bad, but of course, the Kansas City offense is not what it used to be. Travis Kelsey's getting older. The wide receivers getting hurt or suspended or or whatever, and and so that offense just is not as potent as it used to be. Uh, I think that when I watch the Giants defense, I feel like the players that Shane Bowen has are not being taken advantage of as in the best way, and so that's a case where I feel like the sum is less than the individual parts, because while I might make two or three changes in the Giants defense, I think there are a lot of good or potentially good players there who somehow are not giving the Giants a result. On offense, I'm not as convinced that all the parts are there yet. I'm not convinced that they have a good tight end yet. I know that Daboll is very high on Theo Johnson, but I watched during the games and they're not doing that much with him. I like Daniel Bellinger his rookie year, and he got shoved to the back of the depth, not to the back of the depth chart, but below Theo Johnson. Um, they've certainly improved the offensive line, but it's still not a great offensive line. I think
Right.
I think in my opinion, their health issues aside, they're set on the two ends. If they can keep Jermaine Illuminor next year, and if Andrew Thomas can stay healthy, then they're set at tackle. And Bo looks like he has a chance to be a good swing tackle. It's in the interior that I feel that the Giants really don't have what they need yet. So there, I don't know that the talent is present, and if they look on offense as if they are less, the sum being less than the individual parts, I feel like it's the interior offensive line that is the biggest cause of that. You were mentioning to me in a text earlier in the day about I think it was you about the Detroit Lions and
Hmm.
those offensive linemen on the Detroit Lions, and how they're just blowing the Baltimore Ravens defensive line off the ball last night. The Giants haven't had an offensive line like that in ages, and so there I feel like all the individual parts aren't really there yet. On defense, I feel like they're closer to having the parts.
The one thing that I will say about coaching is it's not necessarily maybe that you have coaches who don't understand the game, who don't understand how to teach, who don't understand what it takes. A lot of these guys on the Giants staff have played the game. A lot of these guys played it at a fairly high level. A lot of these guys have done this, even the ones that may not have been, college stars or NFL players or whatever. A lot of these guys have done this for a very long time. But this is where, for me, you start to question when you start to see things like 21 penalties being called, against the team during a game. When you start to see um loose balls on the ground that the other team picks up, that you invariably somehow never seem to pick up. Um when you see you see a play that is maybe one block away from being a big play, or you'll see a missed assignment, or you'll see guys defensively or even on special teams. Coaches always talk about run to the ball, run down the field. Well, watch the defense and watch to see if the players off the ball are giving effort to get to the ball. Okay. Or do they feel like, I covered my gap, I did my job, now let's just see what happens on the rest of the play? And what that tells you is maybe the coach isn't bad, but maybe you've gotten to a point of diminishing returns where the message just where there's been so much losing, and the players begin to feel like this coaching staff just doesn't have the answers anymore. Um, when you're all in with a coaching staff, you'll give that extra effort. You'll bust it to get down the field. You will do anything you possibly can to make that extra block. And unfortunately, not everybody will if they're not 100% bought in. And I don't look at it and think, oh, they can't coach. I just wonder if everyone is tuned in and believes in what they're being taught. That's what I wonder at this point.
And I think you can't be tuned in unless unless you have to believe in what's being done, but then you also have to get some results out of it. And so I think in 2022, again, from the outside, it looked like the players bought in, but 2022 began in predictable fashion with the Giants falling behind. What was it, 13-0 or something like that at the half in Tennessee, and nobody expected them to win on the road. Tennessee was coming off a really good season, and no one expected the Giants to win. And then they came back and won that game at the end, and then they won again, and they won again. They did lose one to Dallas, but even the Dallas loss was a very close loss where they played very well defensively. And then they had those two games against Green Bay and London, and then coming back to MetLife against Baltimore, which to me was the most remarkable Giants game. The two most remarkable Giants games I've seen since the Super Bowl wins, I think. And it looked like all of those players were really bought in to what Daboll was doing. And so the question is, now can Daboll recapture that? Because it doesn't look like the players are bought into what he's doing, and so I think he's got to be looking in the mirror and ask what can I do better. I'm hoping that he thinks that with Dart there are more things that he can do, even though this will be Dart's first game. But I hope that he thinks that with Dart's mobility and with his particular skill set that he can introduce things in the offense that he didn't think he could do with Russell Wilson. We'll see whether that's the case, but I'd like to see something a little closer to the creativity that I thought I saw in 2022. Even though it was still a simplified system, it was a system that kind of fooled defenses, and I just haven't seen that in a while from the Giants, and so that's my hope. That Dart's going to make mistakes. I mean, I think every rookie quarterback does, but does it look like Dart is enabling Daboll to open up the playbook and do things that he wasn't doing with Russell Wilson, or that he wasn't doing with Daniel Jones last season, or Drew Lock, or Tommy DeVito? That's, I guess, what I want to see. And if we see that, then I think there's a chance that this actually works out. I don't think it's a good chance. I don't think I'd want to bet money that Daboll is going to be the Giants coach next season after the way things have begun this year. But if you see that, I can see him saving his job.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason for going to Jaxson Dart, at this point in time. And I think the other thing that you're hoping for is a simple jolt of energy. Okay. I think Brian Daboll isn't dumb. Okay. He's not dumb. All right. I think Brian Daboll can read the room. Okay. I think he understands. I think, he understands where he's at. He understands where his team is at. I think he can read the room. And I think he knows what his own situation is. And this team needs a jolt of energy. It needs reason for hope. It needs reason for optimism. When guys feel like things are getting better, sometimes, everybody's a human being, and sometimes we're all susceptible to, oh, why should I spend an extra half an hour, studying this film or doing this or whatever it might be, when I can go and sit with my family and watch a TV show, or go play with my kids, or or go play with my grandkids, or why should I stay for 10 minutes later at the end of practice and catch those extra balls? We're lousy. We're not going anywhere. Why should I do that? Why should I bust it from one sideline to the other sideline when I'm 40 yards away from the ball, and take a chance on pulling a hamstring, when there's a 95% chance I'm not going to be involved in the play, you know, when we're 0-3 and headed for another 3-14 season, and I know that already, and and nothing's going to change it. So I think he's looking not only for Jaxson Dart to be, a guy that shows he can be that quarterback of the future, but he's looking for the jolt of energy that might come with it too. Because I think the Giants need that right now.
Yeah, and it's hard to get that jolt of energy at MetLife. Uh,
When
where
half the fans are wearing the other team's
when
colors.
yeah, well, so that actually one of my very first reactions after hearing the news this morning that Dart was going to start is, I wonder how many of the fans have already sold their tickets for Sunday's game, and whether you're going to have a crowd there at MetLife that is 50% Chargers fans and 50% Giants fans. My second reaction to that is, well, I don't think the Chargers fan base is anywhere near as extensive as the Chiefs fan base, and so maybe not so many Chargers fans in the New York area, or want to travel to the New York area to see their team, and so maybe that's going to be different. But I think that's, I think, another thing that, I mean, it's a minor thing, but it's got to be something that plays into Mara's mind, and that is when you come out for your first home game of the season, and already half of your tickets by your season ticket holders have been sold to fans of the other team, right? I mean, that's pretty embarrassing when your own fans
Mhm.
won't even come out for the first home game of the season. That is just not a good look at all, right? And so I'll be curious as to whether the crowd on Sunday looks like a Giants crowd or looks like it's a 50% of Chargers crowd.
And that's another reason why I think there's a possibility that Daboll doesn't finish the season if this continues to go south. But what I did want to say is, do me a favor, since I don't want to be a thief. Go ahead and put that thing about the tickets. Go ahead and put that out on social media yourself. Go ahead and put that out there, because if you don't, I'm going to steal it and take credit for it.
Okay.
I do want to clean up just a couple of questions before we call it a show. RS Sharkey wants to know if this makes Russell Wilson a tradable commodity at this point. And my reaction to that is, I think it's entirely possible that Russell Wilson doesn't finish the season as a member of the Giants roster, and everybody will go berserk over $10 million for three losses. Okay. And it is what it is in terms of that. Sometimes, the best laid plans, and everybody loved the way the Giants structured this quarterback room. Every analyst I talked to, every quarterback guru I talked to loved the way that they structured it. Sometimes you make the best plan you can make, and it just doesn't work. In terms of Russ being a tradable asset, there might be a team out there that gets a quarterback injury sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks that thinks, Russell Wilson is better than whoever we have sitting over here on the bench. But I don't think anybody's going to be knocking down the door for Russell Wilson. There wasn't a line of other teams trying to sign Russell Wilson this offseason. I can't imagine Russell Wilson bringing back more than I would be shocked if Russell Wilson brought back more than a sixth round pick that might become a fifth round pick in whatever circumstances we're set in the conditional trade. But I can't imagine that Russ would bring back any more than that. How about you, Tony?
Yeah, I think the only and I wonder whether it would even be this much, right? The thing that's become fashionable in the NFL is to have a trade that is technically a trade, but is almost giving away a player for free, and that is you trade a player and you do a seventh, sixth round pick swap, right? In order to do it, so that the team that's giving up the player is moving up from seventh to sixth round, and that's the only
That's
thing
that's
that's allowed
about it,
out of, yeah.
right?
So I don't know that it
That's
would be much more than that at this point. You can imagine that a team with a really good offensive line, a contender who feels like their quarterback room after an injury to their starting quarterback is in really sad shape, who has receivers who can go get the deep ball and so on and so forth, and is trying to make the playoffs. And you could imagine them doing what you say, giving up a sixth round pick that might become a conditional sixth round pick for Russell Wilson. But yeah, I can't imagine it would be anything more than that at this point. And it's just because he, he's had two really bad performances in a row, and you just don't think that anyone's going to be very impressed with that.
right. Tony, I just wanted to say this has been a very active comment section so far today. Lots of questions, lots of good questions. We really appreciate that. It's not always the case when we do some of these. So we really appreciate you guys listening and being involved. I think want to address just one more question in here before we sign off. The Big Moo asks about the idea that Brian Daboll might call plays now that Jaxson Dart is the starting quarterback. And that is something that if nobody else asks Brian Daboll tomorrow, I fully intend to be in East Rutherford tomorrow morning, and I will ask, for the simple reason that when Mike Kafka was given the play calling back for this year, that is something that became a topic of conversation with myself and Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants. And I have been of the belief, I said then that I thought it was entirely possible that when the Giants went to Jaxson Dart, Brian Daboll would take the play calling back, for the simple reason that this is the only card Brian Daboll has left to play. This is Brian Daboll's quarterback. This is Brian Daboll's guy. And Brian Daboll has been attached to Jaxson Dart's hip ever since they drafted the kid. So I think that's entirely possible that Daboll calls plays for Dart, because my guess at this point is Daboll feels like he is the person on staff who knows Jaxson Dart the best. So I think it's absolutely a possibility. How about you?
I think it's a possibility. I don't think it's a good idea, but I think it's a possibility. I'm talking about what will happen versus what should happen. I generally do not think it's a good idea for head coaches to be calling the plays.
I would agree, but I think it's possible.
But in terms of saying what will happen, I could easily see that happening. And I think that's unfortunate if it does.
All right, Tony, I think that's a good place for us to stop. Thank you for hopping on quickly when I asked you to do that. And again, Giants fans, thank you for all the comments, all the questions, all the positive comments that you put in there. We always appreciate the support. So again, thank you for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.